Hi everyone, Nicole Bowman here, and welcome to another installment of Livethelight podcast. I haven't posted on my YouTube in quite some time because the majority of the new podcast and information is actually on my Instagram. So I'm actually recording this on my phone, so I apologize if there's a little bit of background noise, but I woke up this morning and I was inspired to kind of share some information and share some guidance with you, something that I think we all can learn from. So I'm going to be talking about Gabby Petito today and her soul mission, her soul contract, and why things happened the way that they did. I'm also going to be sharing some guidance and information on domestic violence and abusive partnerships and relationships, and different warning signs that you need to notice. It's interesting because I wasn't going to post anything about Gabby specifically. It just didn't feel like the time was right. But recently I was just watching the news a little bit and I saw that her family recently had a funeral service for her to honor her spirit and to grieve. And so since that funeral has happened and the family has started their grieving process, I think that at this point it's okay to make a video. Typically when when murders like this happen, I don't like to make videos right away. Obviously, I didn't know her personally or know her family, but out of respect for the family, often I feel like there needs to be a little bit of a waiting time where they've been able to properly bury their loved one and pay the respects and say their goodbyes. I always find that it's a good idea to just, even if you don't know the family, allow that to happen before you make a video or do a spiritual reading on it. But now I think it is important to share some thoughts and share some guidance because I feel like this can help people. And this was a part of Gabby's mission. You know, there's been a lot of talk about why there was so much attention placed on Gabby Petito, because missing women, unfortunately, who are pretty, smart, funny, charismatic, just like Gabby was, unfortunately, they go missing every day, right? But Gabby went international, she went global, right? So there are people all over the world who are talking about this case and sharing information about what happened to her. Not unlike George Floyd or Sandra Bland or Breonna Taylor, different people like that. So what do they all have in common, right? Because all the people that I mentioned, they're not necessarily celebrities or anything of that nature. Why did their stories go global and stories of other people who've gone through similar things have not gone global? They went global and viral because their missions were global. Gabby's mission was a global one, meaning that when her soul came to this planet, she was meant to touch people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, races, religions, creeds, different countries. Had she lived, Gabby would have traveled the globe. She would have gone to South America, she would have gone to Africa, she would have gone to Europe, she would have gone to many different places with her van. She also would have flown, she would have backpacked, she would have hiked. There are a lot of things that she would have done on a global level to learn about different cultures and different backgrounds because her soul mission was to connect with other people and bring light and joy into the world. But it was also to understand how strong and resilient she was and to know that she could stand on her own 2 feet. Because you have to understand, on its surface or on her face, Gabby doesn't appear to be an underdog, but she was often underestimated, because she was pretty, she was cute, she was petite. And people would often say, okay, well, you got all of that. And they would kind of write her off initially, right? But with time, she would always prove people wrong. She would prove how strong she was and charismatic and resilient and intelligent. And she would prove people wrong time and time again. So she was, in a lot of respects, an underdog. Didn't appear to be an underdog, because she's pretty and popular and all of that, but she quite often could be underestimated. But she would always prove people wrong. She had strength to her. She had a resilience. So this was going to go global because in order for Gabby to fulfill her soul mission, she had to touch people in many different parts of the globe, as I said before. The other thing, though, which is a positive in the midst of this tragedy, is that her family is going to carry on her legacy and her mission, specifically her father and her stepfather. I know that Gabby would have written a book. In addition to vlogging, she would have written a book. I even feel with school, she would have gone to school. I think she would have studied filmmaking. I just get a feeling about that with her because she had a very creative soul and a very creative spark to her. But her stepfather is going to carry on that mission. I feel they're going to write a book honoring her legacy. I also feel they're going to start a foundation for domestic violence. They're going to start a foundation kind of like to support young women. So over the next few years, that's actually going to come to fruition, I feel. And so, once they do write the book or start a foundation or things like that, if you want to support, make sure that you do that, because that actually be living out her mission. I also feel a lot of her friends, other people that she's touched, even complete strangers, especially young girls, young women around her age, a bit younger, it's going to inspire them to travel. It's going to inspire them to go to different parts of the globe and the world. So the thing is, even in tragedy, God is in control, meaning that despite the domestic violence and things that Gabby went through, where she was dealing with an abuser who tried to snuff out her light, at the end of the day, it didn't work, because she, even in her passing, is touching lives, and she will touch lives of millions of people, millions. Similar to what we saw with George Floyd, what we saw with Breonna Taylor, because their missions were global too. Right? So I want to talk about the warning signs of abusive partnerships and relationships. And initially, I was going to make this just like a quick little Instagram video, but I was feeling Gabby's spirit around me, and I felt like it was important to just to share some things about her life and what she was here to do. But I want to share two warning signs that will often happen in the beginning of a partnership or relationship. And if you see these two warning signs, you need to go, you need to get out of there. You do not need to stay. In the beginning of a relationship, typically within the first 2 to 3 months, maybe 6 months, but abusive partnerships do tend to move very, very fast. So within the first 2 to 3 months, if they give you the threat of physical violence, not that they hit you, but they threaten to hit you, someone else, or hurt or harm themselves, you need to get out of there, and you need to get out of there quick. And the reason why is because abusive people are always narcissistic. I'm not saying they necessarily have narcissistic personality disorder. That's a diagnosis. That's an entirely different thing. But abusive people have more narcissistic traits than they do have empathic traits, and they do have selfless traits. They tend to have more selfish traits, more self-aggrandizing traits, and more paranoia. Narcissistic people always need to have folks under their control because they are so chaotic on the inside, right? They feel so chaotic on the inside. So they have to control everything around them, their environment and other people. They will often threaten physical violence as a means or method of controlling you. And if you stay in the relationship after they've threatened you, themselves, or somebody else in that way, the abuse will only escalate. Because whether you realize it or not, what they're doing is they're taking your temperature. They're trying to see if you're under their control, and they're trying to see what level of abuse you will allow. If you allow or accept that level of abuse, it will continue to escalate. And it will never get better. It will always get worse. They will always up the ante because abusive people need to be in control. And so the more they need to be in control, the more extreme they get. So if they threaten some form of physical violence to you, themselves, or another person, get out of there quick. You all know how I feel about ghosting. I don't agree with ghosting and leaving people high and dry. You need to give people an explanation. But in the case of an abusive person, no explanation is necessary because they won't listen to reason anyway. And once they know you're going to leave, they'll get even more violent. So you get out of there, and you get out of there quick. The second one is verbal abuse, but not just passive aggressive or putting you down or laughing at you. All of that is abusive and it's mean. I'm talking about a level of abuse where there is name calling, where it is super explosive, it's hateful. It's almost like they become a Jekyll and Hyde, and they're saying all these horrible things to you or about you or to other people in a very explosive manner. If there's a threat of violence, or if there's the verbal violence or verbal abuse that is really, really explosive within the first 2 to 3 months of the relationship, you need to get out of there, and you need to get out of there immediately, because it will escalate. And once they threaten physical violence, eventually they will start putting their hands on you, whether that's hitting, kicking, slapping, choking, restraining, whatever that might be. So those are the 2 warning signs. I did actually write an e-guide on abusive partnerships and relationships. If you want to check it out on my Patreon. To be clear, this is not an advertisement for my Patreon, but in light of a lot of things that have happened with Gabby Petito and a lot of missing and exploited women and children, I do think it's really important to know what those signs are. But the first 2 that I've shared are warning signs in the very beginning. They're red flags. As soon as you see them, you need to get out of there. The final thing I want to say as well, for any of you who are listening, who may be in abusive partnerships or relationships yourself, I always advocate getting out, and getting out quickly. And the reason I say this is because specifically when there's physical violence, that's only going to escalate and escalate and escalate. And I've read for a lot of people over the years that were in very abusive partnerships and relationships and didn't realize how close they came to losing their lives. I was in an abusive partnership and relationship too. And when I look back, more than one actually, when I look back, hindsight is 20/20. But when I look back, I could see how close I was to being in real, real physical danger. A lot of times when we have been abused and beaten down and gaslit, and our reality has been denied over and over and over again, we become desensitized to that abuse, and we don't realize how dysfunctional and dangerous it is. Yes, with intimate partner violence, there are times where those deaths, those murders are premeditated. That's absolutely true. But there are also times where they're not premeditated and they just escalate. And it started as an argument, which turns into a physical fight, and then a weapon is pulled out, and then somebody loses their life, or a person has a criminal record, or so forth. These things can escalate pretty quickly, especially when you're dealing with narcissistic people, because they always need you to be under their control. So if you're not acting the way they want you to act, if you're not giving them the level of control or respect they think they deserve, it can escalate very quickly. So I hope that helped you. If you're in a situation like this, just get out. That's all I can say. Just get out. And if there is an abusive person in your life and they're not going to change, and they're not going to get help, and they're not going to go to counseling, therapy, you got to remove those people from your life. Because who you marry, who you have children with, who you have as close friends, that impacts every aspect of your life. And it can really make or break your success. It can really make or break your spiritual growth. The people that are closest to you, that really does affect your future. So be very, very selective and mindful of the company you keep, because abusers can be very cunning. They're not always that smart, but they can be very cunning. And they can be very manipulative, And once that abuse escalates, it just keeps escalating. You'll never get back to the happy days when you first met them. It'll always be chaotic. It'll always be a drama. It'll always be something. So if you get out now and you stay out, you have a chance of having a really beautiful life. Okay. So I will leave you with that. And as I said, God, Creator, Great Spirit holds the pen. People may try to play God. They may try to snuff out someone's light, but they can never, ever do that, because the soul is stronger. So for readings and more, you know where to find me. You can also connect with me on Patreon and Instagram. And always remember to live your light, live your bliss, love yourself. Take care, guys.